tutorial, we are going to be going over assemblies. Assemblies are a Revit function that acts like a group, but is designed for creating auto views and schedules, which we're going to be going over in this tutorial as well. These are very useful for creating prefabricated elements or complex structural assemblies. So in this tutorial, we're going to kind of continue with what we were doing before, which was we had our level 2 layout and we had the automatic stud wall, which it looks like this. Now the one downside to this is it's not really great at creating views. If let's say you were doing a paneling system and you wanted to do it for the entire outside of the wall, the problem is you would, I'm just going to turn the walls on here. Sorry, I'm just going to turn these walls on real quick. So the downside to having something like this is, what if you wanted to do a paneling system? You wanted to ship each portion of prefabricated wall. And what happens if, for instance, you had on the inside of the wall you had like some sort of assembly, but in each single unit it's exactly the same, and you wanted to prefabricate each one of these units and send them out that way. So Assemblies kind of lets you do that. It's, if you haven't used them before, it's up here, so it's under the Modify tab under Create. So you can create an assembly, you can create a group, or you can create parts. Groups are basically like, think about blocks in AutoCAD. They operate like this, so you can see this little emblem down here. See if it'll load again. So you can do that. You can do so basically an assembly operates the exact same way. The only difference is with an assembly you can create automatic views and schedules with it. So for this tutorial we're going to actually be going over how to create a wall assembly. We're going to create it from scratch with steel stud, and then we're going to add other elements like piping and wall fixtures. So let's get started. So we're going to start by just opening the standard project that I had open before, which was the stud wall layout. If you don't have this project, you can find this in other tutorials that I've done on my channel. So once you have that, just insert the steel stud and steel track family that I had created in the other tutorials as well. You're going to need these because these can actually calculate. So when we actually pre-generate these schedules, you're going to need to be able to have something to pull that information from. So first things first, we'll just kind of go over how an assembly operates. So I'm going to cut a section through here, a new section through here. I'm just going to bring this back. We should have a wall here. And then we're just going to go and we're going to start by putting a track down on the ground. So we don't want the bent track, we just want a standard 3 5/8 track, 1/4 inch lip. It's just going to want to place on the wall. We should actually do this in level 2. Put this down here. So this should be housed on, just make sure that it's all set properly. Reference level 2. And we're just going to put some studs down real quick just to kind of go over this. 3 5/8, it's fine. So I'll put some studs down. You could use the curtain wall panel as well, if you wanted to just draw it straight and have it done quick. I find with assemblies it's better to have a little more control over where you're placing your studs, because I find with when you're creating an assembly or something that needs to be prefabricated, you want it to have the ability to just add studs wherever you want, and just be able to copy it wherever. Not that you can't do that with the curtain wall family that we created, but I just like to have a little more control. So I'm going to go back to here, and I'm just going to select this track, and I'm going to hit create assembly. It's going to ask you to name it, so we're just going to name this prefab wall assembly. Is it okay? And you've created your first assembly. So once you create the assembly, you get a couple options here. So you can create views, edit assembly, and disassemble. So these are pretty straightforward. You go into edit assembly, that's fine. Hit no, that's okay. So it turns green. So anything that's green is actually inside your assembly. So you can tell that we have this track and these studs, or sorry, this track and these studs are not a part of the assembly. So you just go to add. This is a lot like a group. You just go and you click the items you want to add in. Then you hit finish. And that's really all the difference you can do with an assembly, versus just having it not an assembly. It's kind of like it's a block now. So once you have this created, you go down to your assemblies, you have your prefab wall assembly, and so it's almost like a family almost at this point. So you just select it, you go create views, and then you basically pick all the views you want. So if you're going to be doing structural framing schedule, which we're going to have, we're going to probably put some like plywood or drywall on this as well. So I'll walk through how to get areas and stuff like that, so you can create special families for that. We'll probably need that as well for when we do add our piping. And I guess we could just include all of these. I don't see why we couldn't. Just for an example, we can always delete them later if we want. So you can create a view template for each of these as well. So if you want fine detail for everything, or depends on what you want, we can go through these view templates as well. So it's going to create all of these at a specific scale. I'll just leave it at 1/2 inch for now, and you can pre-name these. So if you don't want it to be, or maybe you can't do that. That you could. I guess you can change the name when you actually create the views anyways. So and then it creates a sheet for you as well if you want. So if you want it to be all on this sheet, you can add multiple sheets too as well. So we're just going to hit OK, and there's our assembly. So all these views are pre-generated for you. There's a section through the middle, so this would be good to where you would want to have a good view template, so that way you can just have them all referenced the same way. So under your assemblies, under your prefab wall assembly, you're going to see all these different families here, or views. So let's see, we'll go to a plan detail view. So that would be a horizontal cut through. So if you wanted to edit it, you actually have to double click in, and you can just put it together, I guess. Add all these little pieces together. You can lock them if you want. And that's the main basis of how to do this. So let's take a look at our material Takeoff. Probably won't have much in there. Yeah, just galvanized steel. Let's see, what about this as well? So it's only got, so it pre-generates just family type and count. When you pre-generate these, if you have a special way that you want to have this schedule made, you can pre-make a schedule type here, and you can edit the fields. So because we have very specific items here, we can just go, we'll just add a couple here just so I can kind of go over it real quick. We'll just add description, sure. We'll add family and type, back I guess, length, level. Mark number is one that's going to be pretty important. Eventually what we want to do is we're going to create custom tag markers for these structural steel members, so that way when you create your elevations and everything, you can tag them and they'll all be listed in the material takeoff. So we'll have part number as well. Let's just see what that looks like. Okay. Okay, so we got, so cut length 1, we don't need that. Let's get rid of that. You can obviously resort these. Anybody who's used the schedule before knows how that works. So we'll get rid of length. And we'll also go into sorting and grouping. And then we'll just sort by, usually you'd sort by the mark number, and then you'd probably sort by part number maybe, and then by cut length. I think that's how I would usually do it. And then I would uncheck itemize every instance. So you can see here, like we have 4 studs. Sorry, more than 4 studs. We have 5 studs here. They're all the same length. We obviously want it to all be noted as the same part number, the same length. So we want to itemize the number of 7'11" and 9/32 studs. So we would uncheck this, and we would hit OK, and then you would get your schedule here. Now, for instance, if we wanted to keep adding to this, and we wanted to add another track at the top, let's say, go back to our level 2. We'll go and we'll add another track to our drawing. So we'll go structure, beam, steel studs. That's the one we use there. Just go like this. We're gonna place it in, but we're gonna want to move this up. We're gonna want to length 8 feet, offset. We'll make the offset 8 feet. Still keep the reference level at 2 feet, our level 2. And then we'll just go back to our section here. Where'd it go? Oh, it's behind. That's my bad. Put it here. Put it back up at 8 feet. Back to our view. Tracks right here. That's actually pretty close height to what it's going to be at. So we'll just hit align. Actually, you know what? We'll have this go all the way up to the roof, and then we'll just select it again, and then we'll use this flip toggle. Should be there. There we go. Behind the wall, maybe. Weird. Oh, it reset it, I think. It's weird. It's doing some weird stuff here. Anyways, we'll go into here, we'll edit the assembly, and we'll add this in, just so you can see what we're doing. Hit finish, and then we'll go back to our assemblies. Where is it? Front elevation is probably the best one. Oh, I guess it would. Okay, so sorry, left elevation, because it's referencing it based on north, south, east, west within your project. So if you hit front, it's going to reference this side as the front. It's going to reference the left side as the front side as left. So just be aware of that when you're creating your assemblies. You can always just change the names too. There's no reason why you couldn't, just to keep it consistent. And then we can go, I think there's a 3D view here as well. So if we wanted to go in here and edit this, let's back up. Maybe we need a top view to align this. Just gonna align the sides, or maybe we won't. It's gonna be kind of tricky sometimes. So level 2, offset 8 feet. View in 3D. Oh, that's why. Let's move this over here. And we'll just align these. Is it doing that? Sorry. I think for some reason you had to go negative. That's unusual. I guess because it flipped the work plane. Okay, so that's the basics of doing creating an assembly. If you wanted to make this more parametric, I would suggest using reference planes. I tend to create separate reference planes, so that way, like creating a new one and giving it a new color. So if I created a reference plane here, you had a line style. How do you do that again? I think it's under subcategory. Can't remember how to do that. I believe it's under manage object styles, and you can change it under here. We're just going to use the normal one we have right now for now. So we're just going to create a couple of reference planes. So if you knew that this was your work zone, you would create a reference plane there, and then you could also just create well, I guess you would use the grids in this case for your tracks. So you could just align it to the grid, lock it. Same thing with these. You might as well lock the grid to here. So this is where the curtain wall track type would be pretty useful, because you wouldn't have to do this for everything. We'll hit finish, and then we'll go back to the assembly view and just make sure that it all went to where it was supposed to go. We'll check the 3D view. So it didn't go there, so we're gonna oops, so we're gonna hit AL. Just we'll lock it so that way it's there. Hit finish. There'd be obviously some cleanup and stuff that you'd have to do afterwards. you could just go here, and I would just go to level 2, and I would maybe put down some dimensions on some more reference planes, and I would just use those to I would use those reference planes and create like 16 on centers and just align all my studs to it. So that's the basics. So in the next tutorial, we're going to end it here because it's getting kind of long. So in the next tutorial, what we're going to go over is creating an opening type, so that way you can create cuts inside your studs, because eventually what you're going to want to do is do an elevation of studs with pre-cuts in it, for, you know, piping, or for let's say you have to add like galvanized steel or something like that, or a gusset plate or something. So we're going to create an opening. We're going to create almost like a surface, I guess, something for plywoods, and when we create the surface, we're going to have it calculate the area, so that way when you generate it, it will actually tell you. So if you had to make it, you know, a little bit, you had to cut the plywood in half, it'll tell you that that's the amount of area and that's the dimensions of it that you'll actually need. So you'll need like let's say a 2 foot by 4 foot piece of plywood. It'll call that out for you, and then you can give those also mark numbers, and you know, schedule everything through your material list down here, your material takeoff. So thanks for watching. See you in the next video.